Welcome back to another NCAT movie review. Today we have Smile 2. Sorry if this sounds a little bit on edge, but we're on day 3 of no sleep. We're trying to figure out how to beat this goddamn demon.
The movie picks up 6 days after the ending of the original Smile. Now, if you remember what happened at the end of that movie, Rose succumbs to the demon. She dies. Her ex-boyfriend, Joel, sees that, and then the movie ends. Now, this movie picks up with Joel 6 days into the demon taking over his body, and he's trying to put the demon onto somebody else. It goes wrong. He does put the demon onto somebody else, but it ends up being a drug dealer who's in the wrong place at the wrong time. The main character in this movie is Naomi Scott. She plays Sky Riley, a famous singer who's coming back from a traumatic experience that we learned throughout the movie. She was in a drunk driving accident. Her boyfriend was killed. She's trying to make her comeback on the big stage. From the car accident, we find out that she's dependent on drugs, pain medication. She goes to a drug dealer's house, the same drug dealer that Joel passed the demon onto. What happens? He passes the demon onto her. Now she has it. She spends the rest of the movie fighting off the demon. Very similar to Smile 1. Now, Smile 1 worked, so you don't really need to change too much if you're wanting to make a sequel and you want people to come and see it and go, this is a great movie. So, in that regard, it was good. It still felt fresh. Yes, the plotline was quite similar. Instead of a psychiatrist, we have a famous singer. But the scares and the thrill and also the unease throughout this whole movie was still there from the first one. Now, I don't know if that's because I'm still scarred from watching the first movie, and I literally can't look at the thumbnail from the first movie without getting a shiver down my spine because that movie just scarred me. And also, the movie ran at 499 hertz in the cinema, and my ears were ringing for the next week. I don't know. But this movie had the same hallmarks as the first one, and honestly, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I liked it.
I don't want to rush too far past the first opening scene either, because it was actually one continuous shot, and watching that was actually so impressive to see because it opened up and had a precedent set with how good the cinematography was going to be just from this opening scene. That's how good this opening scene is. It puts you immediately on edge, and it gives you that eeriness feeling that you recognize from the first movie.
The cinematography had no right to be as good as it was in this movie. I mean, this is like you're going into it thinking it's a horror movie. It's going to be, who cares so much about the cinematography? Yeah, obviously it's a big budget-ish movie, so they take care of the cinematography and to make it look good. But like this movie had great transitions. Some of the mirror shots that you saw had no right to be that good. It's completely surprising.
I didn't realize Christopher Nolan was fucking directing this, for God's sake. It was that good.
That was like one of the main takeaways. I mean, obviously the horror aspect of this movie, but once this movie wrapped, me and Josh were like, shit, some of those transitions were actually really, really tight and just completely surprising when we've seen as many horror movies that we've seen in the last 2 to 3 years that were just garbage. But this movie actually really well shot. And just like touching off what Josh was saying about the opening, it was such a great way to open this movie because you were in the box seat. As soon as that opening sequence happened with Joel, you're like, oh, I remember you from the last movie, so this is good. It's tying into the first one. And then it was action-packed, and it was a really big scene, and you were just like, oh, straight into it. There was no sort of building up the plot line or let's just go through the motions again to get a new character who's possessed, and pretty much the same way the first film ran. No, it was like straight away, demons back, Joel's fighting demons, murked real badly, and then the time between Joel passing the demon on to the drug dealer and Sky Riley getting the demon was really quick. It felt like it wasn't like they were just trying to drag out a movie for the sake of dragging out the movie. It was actually felt like it wasn't too long between this and this. Like in some of these slasher films, it can just get dragged out, like would just be baseless, useless plot points. It's like we're here to see a horror movie, we're not here to see this incredible story. But this movie did it really well, where they transitioned from Joel to Sky to the drug dealer. Props to them that it felt like the pacing of this is really, really on point.
And also, talking about the drug dealer himself, Lucas, I noticed that not only the cinematography was so good in this, but the ambient lighting they used in Lucas's apartment was just so eerie itself and so horrifying because it was allowing you to have enough light to see, but not enough light to see deep into the room, in the corners, in through the doorways. You just didn't know what was coming and what was going to happen.
Yeah, one of the ways they made the movie fresh was Skylar is obviously, like we mentioned, a famous singer, and they incorporated the fact that when she was getting haunted by the demon, rather than it just being like one demon chasing after her or a couple of demons chasing after her, there was a scene, for instance, where she's in her hotel room. Obviously, she turns around, there's a bunch of people there. She turns the other way, there's a bunch of people there. And instead of them, running with a knife or running at her all crazily, they were sort of moving in this choreography way, like they would on a stage. And it was the backup dancers from her rehearsal that she had just done earlier. And that was just an interesting way to show, like, you felt so uneasy because here's these, like, 5, 6, 7 or 8 backup dancers, and they're sort of crawling Thriller style, Michael Jackson-like, over her furniture, through her closet to like get to her. And it was sort of like the angels from Doctor Who when she turns away from them, they get closer to her, then she turns back and they stop. And I really love when movies do that because Doctor Who scarred the hell out of me back in the day when I accidentally watched that goddamn angel episode. And seeing that again in this movie, every time I see that in a horror movie, it's equally as scary. And in this one, they did it really cool because they incorporated it to Skylar's career. So, there was more on the surface of this movie than just, okay, Smile 1 did good, so let's put out another one because it's going to do good. No, they actually went above and beyond to make it a different movie so that that felt fresh and new.
And in my opinion, I actually like this one better. I know people like the first one because it set such a good hallmark for what scary movies are.
Yes.
But this one, to me, had all of the hallmarks from the first one and plus a good storyline on top of this. And I love cinematography and I love the storylines. And they were the two big aspects for me of why I think this was just a little bit better, because it was following a kind of like a more flamboyant actress and something little bit different and not so just in the norm of a regular person, which is why I understand people love that first one as well, because it's just relating to regular life. But this one is kind of like done on steroids a little bit. That's why I like it.
I think if you went back and watched the first one, you would be like, okay, I remember why this movie was so good.
I can't, because I'm dead set scarred from it.
Yeah, and that's facts. And going on the topic of acting, like Josh mentioned, Naomi Scott deserves her flowers tenfold. Following on from Sosie Bacon, who in the first film was able to act and show paranoia, schizophrenia almost, just absolute crazed delusion that she showed in the first one. You were like all in, because the way she acted in that first one, she really pushed the fact that she was getting haunted. Naomi Scott took that to another level, believe it or not. I can't believe that she did it, but she really did. Her acting in this, from manic to stressed out to lack of sleep to just downright going crazy, was incredible. The way she was able to really push the fact that I'm losing my mind here. To the point where her tick was ripping her hair out. Every time she ripped that hair out, it was gross. Give props to the people in the noise department as well, in the special effects department, because the noise when she ripped that hair out, it was like that was the key for you to lock back in after a scary moment or a moment where the paranoia was really high, because she ripped the hair out and then you're like, oh, okay, we're back in this, because this really just puts me back in the scene in the moment that she is currently in right now, that she's struggling to get through. So the acting in general in this movie was great. Even Rosemary DeWitt, who plays Sky's mum, who plays the perfect mummager. Like, you just think Kris Kardashian, she played that role perfectly. And also we have Morris, who is a character who comes along and you don't really know what his goal is. You don't really know who he is. All the way through to the end of the movie, I finished the movie, I said to Josh, who the hell is Morris? Like, was he actually there? Let me know in the comments if you think Morris is actually there or not, because I still don't know. And even Dylan Jalula, who is Gemma, who's Sky's ex-best friend, she comes back into the fold, but the way she acted, but it's a testimony to the actors and actresses in this, because throughout the movie, you don't really know what's real, what's not, and they sell it like crazy. And once again, just Naomi Scott. She deserves praise. Wow.
Jordy's exactly right there. When you talk about you don't know what's real and what's not in this whole film, I'm talking halfway through the film, you legitimately don't know what's real, what's not. I actually still don't know if the scene's real or not. It's all conjured up under the demon, and the demon has so much more control in this, which is why I think I found it so scary this time around instead of a little bit. I was traumatized the first one, and don't get me wrong, I'm traumatized this one, but I think in this film, the amount of illusion and the amount of misdirections that it had also added just another layer and another tier of a horror aspect in this film.
One way that I know that this movie was really well done was there was two specific scenes. One that really got me, like it actually made me yell in the cinema, which made
audibly, I heard it.
Which made everyone sort of laugh. But there was two scenes that, if this was a bad movie, they went way too long, and the punchline, I guess, for the scare, it just dragged. Like, they were really long scenes. So it was a scene where one of the characters is looking in a doorway, and she's looking there for probably a good 2-3 minutes, and you're sort of like, this is going a bit too long. But because this movie builds such anticipation for what's coming and builds the intensity so well, you're glued to your seat watching this scene that could possibly be going for too long, but you don't even realize it. And then it also happened with another scene where she's watching a video on her phone, and the scene goes for way too long, but it's just works somehow. And that's a testimony to, I guess, the actors, the writers, but also just the fact that Smile has this sort of vibe about it, where you go in watching it going, I will watch someone looking at their phone for a scene far too long, but I'll be glued to my seat because I'm like, I know there's fucking something coming and it's going to get me. And then it does. So that's how I sort of know that this movie's good. Because in another movie, say like a Halloween, Scream or whatever, you'd be like, oh, this is just, they've gone way too long here. But in this movie, it works.
It's actually in a league of its own, isn't it? Smile is just in its own goddamn element. No one can really touch it.
Yeah.
But we talk a lot about here, ambient scenes, the sounding, all that sort of stuff. They just picked the right time to not use sound half the time. I remember there one particular scene where there was zero sound. It scratched something in my brain I couldn't reach. It was continuously silent, but a lot of camera movement around the area. I don't know if you guys have watched Longlegs, but it's either from the point of view of the main character, and that is what this scene was shot at. That's what this scene was shot at a lot. And that's what kind of put me at unease, and it just terrified me even more, was that you don't know what's coming because you can't see around the scene itself. You can't see around the bedroom, and this is the main scene that it applies in. And it was just like little things like that. And also like little things where they just kept the demon around in a stupid scene, but it was enough to just let you know that it's always lurking in the corner or lurking in a line or somewhere around. And it just builds the scene so well, this film. It's not always like jump scare climax, moving on. Jump scare, it just built that and held it there, held the tension there forever, which is why I think I'm still traumatized 4 days later.
Yeah, and even like to a point where one of the great scenes was, you know, the character's just sort of talking to a friend, and then the next thing you know, the friend's like, that's because you're a really bad person. And it's just out of nowhere. And it doesn't build up to that one scene, that sort of, and then everyone in the cinema, and also Naomi Scott on the screen, you see is like, what did you just say?
What did you say? Yeah.
And then the camera pans, and it's just her friend just smiling at it, and you're like, oh, that's not cool. I don't like that. So that's why I think Smile, like Josh said, is in a league of its own, because, you know, it's not some old lady that's haunting them, or it's not some demon that's in the house because someone died. It's just like, it comes from nowhere. And the demon almost has fun in this movie, haunting someone. Like in the ending of the first film, where she thinks she's gotten away and she thinks she's beaten it, and then it's like, actually, you're still in the house and you're dying and you're about to, you know, lose to me. So that's why I think Smile will always, one, have my respect, and two, will always be a movie where I watch once. That's it. I'm never watching two, and I'm never watching one ever again.
One bad thing I want to say about this film, I know I praised it very highly, but one bad thing. In the first one, the demon CGI was way better. It was almost a real demon who was approaching Rose through the doorway, and it reminds me of actually the barbarian chick. But this demon was so realistic, and it was obviously played by a real person with a lot of prosthetic makeup. But then you go into this one, and it's purely CGI'd, so obviously the budget was overspent on the cinematography and everyone else. But I mean, I can kind of forgive that just because it was only a short segment of the movie, and the movie was great up until that last like 5 seconds. But who gives a shit? You know, it's just one CGI scene, and you already know from the first one what the demon looks like. But maybe it's just doing that to fuck around with them as well. So you never.
And like, we're not in this to see the demon. That's one thing that I think a lot of these scary movies have started to learn in recent times is you don't need to always show a demon. Look at Insidious, for God's sake, the greatest jump scare of all time, and it was for 2 seconds behind the goat, Patrick Wilson's head, the devil.
But then one thing I do want to talk about, and this is a spoiler, so you can fast forward to the end after this. This is my theory on Morris, for anyone who's fucking listening. Morris was real in the bar, and then when they started talking about how to defeat it, he was a nurse, blah, 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 all of that could have been real. Then I think the demon caught on and thought, I'm going to just fuck with this chick the rest of the movie and make her think that she's in control. And then, as you see, if you've seen the movie, or towards the end, where Morris comes back and he's at this pizzeria, it looks like shit, and then he coaxed her into this freezer, which is, the most dingiest thing you've ever seen. And then that whole scene there, when she first meets Morris, when she's in the car, when she wakes up, I think even further than that, that's when it starts to be delusional. That's my theory on Morris, that he wasn't real from then. As always, guys, we end these reviews with a rating. This is honestly my number one scary movie of all time. Go see this film. I'm telling you, Smile was up there for me. Longlegs was up there for me. This is higher than that. Go see this film. It is immaculate.
For me, I would definitely say to anyone and everyone, go watch this film. If you want to feel uneasy, if you want to feel just completely on edge, this is the movie to see. I still think Smile 1 takes the cake for me, only because I'm genuinely actually scarred from it. Like, every time I see that thumbnail, it gives me literal PTSD. So Smile 1's still the greatest, but Smile 2 is a great addition to the series, and I think obviously they're going to make another one because it's great, but yeah, this is a great movie.
Keep bumping them out.
Naomi Scott, props. You know how to freaking act.
Literally. Anyway, guys, if you enjoyed the content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe.
Question of the day. What movie left you the most scarred? Now, for me, it would have to be Paranormal Activity. I mean, I was about 11 years old when I watched it. I shouldn't have watched it. But since then, Smile 1. I can't even watch it again. I can't watch it again. So, Smile 1.
As a kid, for me, the Rob Zombie Halloween H2O, watching the kid just grow up being a serial killer, I don't know why. It's something to do with that mask. That fucking kid annoys the shit out of me. I want to throw hands with him if I see him in an RL. Anyway, guys, been another End Cut movie review. Peace, we out.
Peace.
And cut.